This Guy's Garage. Like and subscribe.
To order, I'd like to welcome our witness for the second hour from the Center of International Governance Innovation. Aaron Shull is the Managing Director and General Counsel.
From your position, obviously the Center for International Governance and Innovation, follows these sort of things as a think tank and has a view that many of us don't always have. And so I'd be interested to know from your perspective, is Canada's legislative framework sufficient to and appropriate to properly combat the rising and the more aggressive foreign interference?
So thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. It's a great question, Mr. Motz. And I would say maybe two things. There's one answer that deals with our legislation. And look, there's a bunch of statutory reviews that we're still waiting for. So I think we should start there. But it's also, there's the legislative reviews and the tune-ups that would be required, but also a national security strategy. Because for me, and I appreciate what we're doing here, we're having one single conversation about one single government in one single area. And it was ditto for the Foreign Interference Commission, where we're looking at elections. Of course, it's much broader than that. And so what I would urge is a strategy that looks at the relationship between trade, economic development, intellectual property theft, research support, defense industrial strategy. It's all connected. And so treating them as categorically discrete things, I actually think misses a huge opportunity. And the last thing I'll say is that adversarial states view these areas as strategically linked. And so I think it behooves us to do the same.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to expand on that just a little bit. I know I was very intrigued with our previous witness, Mr. Singh, and his testimony, and he kind of alluded to the fact that sometimes a government needs to put aside our foreign policy for the sake of protecting domestic potential harms. And so when you build a national security strategy, how do you marry those, how do you properly marry those to, of course, every country, we need to have a relationship with our allies, obviously, in other countries, but we also got to keep our citizens safe. How do we do that and develop a national security strategy that is appropriate for a serious of an issue as foreign interference?
Yeah, I'm a realist and not in the Clausewitzian sense of the word. Obviously, I realize that there's strong states out there, and strong states are going to behave in any way that they see fit. And I think we're on the receiving end of a little bit of that right now, where India is flexing its newfound muscle on the global stage, right? And so this is inevitably one of the things that you're going to see. That being said, I think the highest order of government, the highest concern of government is to keep citizens safe. And so if we're talking about a series of counterbalancing trade-offs, it's awfully hard to trade citizen lives for the purposes of a trade deal. And look, I realize that the world's a complicated place, but I would just say this, that if we're going to be doing a strategy and we're going to be looking at what's the first objective in the first sentence of that strategy, it is the highest responsibility of government is to keep Canadian citizens safe, period.
Thank you. And I appreciate that, because I think that is one of the government's first initial responsibilities. Now, does Canada have the capacity to handle the more aggressive foreign interference that we're seeing? Is the current government taking sufficient action on foreign interference? And if not, how can we improve that?
Well, so it's interesting. I mean, the example that I was drawing at when I said we should look at speaking indictments, when that happened in the United States, I mean, you should read how the U.S. treated it. I mean, they caught the guy before he was able to commit the assassination. They deployed a sophisticated undercover apparatus. And then the charging document, it's beautiful. Like this, I went to law school at Columbia Law, so I know a little bit about the U.S. legal system. This individual's chances of successfully defending that prosecution is about 0%. And so, look at the way that it worked in the U.S. They interdicted it before it happened. Look at the way it happened here. Someone lost their life, and now there's an investigation. And so when I'm thinking about the best way to answer your question, I would start to think about the resources of the RCMP and whether or not that institution, as currently constructed, is fit for service, because the 21st century is a lot different than the 20th one. And so what does a modern police force look like that has to deal with everything from sophisticated foreign interference operations to cyber attacks and on and on?
Thank you. I appreciate that. And you almost drew me in to ask a question about the RCMP, but I want to stick with the statement you made about this speaking indictments. It intrigues me. What you're really saying is the role of government in a situation like this is transparency. And that's really what a speaking indictment is, a transparency document. And, how do we address, the transparency or the lack of transparency that's currently happening, and how this government and how any government could handle foreign interference now and moving forward?
Well, I mean, that's it, right? I watched the press conferences the same as you did when the commissioner was out there. I looked at the previous witnesses' testimony. I've read all the reports. So, but it was, for us, it was like drip, 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 right? The story was revealed slowly. And really, when we first heard about it as Canadians, and look, I'm not security cleared, I'm just some guy, right? So I was watching this on TV like everyone else. It was the story was revealing itself quite slowly, and it was unclear. And I think as a consequence of that, we probably did a bit of a disservice for Canadians because they were having a hard time following the shifting narrative. Whereas in the US, it's like you pick up that indictment, you know exactly what the guy did, who he was working with, how he did it. Like there's no room for debate. And so the transparency piece through that mechanism is crystal clear.
Thank you, Mr. Motz.
Thank you, Mr. Scholl.
Mr. Shirai.
You also mentioned disinformation, and there's a big problem with diaspora communities watching channels that are either aired from India or other China or other places, or they're not really under Canadian CRTC purview. What's the best method of countering disinformation for our Canadian audiences? I mean, we had done it, and I'd asked this the last time, I think, with Russian television, RTTV, under CRTC. It got removed from cable networks. But what are other methods that other states that you might have studied have that are better than what we have currently, or how we can improve on disinformation campaigns by foreign entities?
Yeah, and I think the one distinction I wish to draw here is when we're talking about it, let's be crisp that we're speaking about information operations run by state actors, because normal people have the right to be wrong. You can say pretty much anything you want, right? So leaving aside individuals and the various free speech rights that go along with that, when it comes to state actors, we haven't talked about leaning on the sanctions regime at all. So that was one thing I advocated for a fairly pronounced way when it came to Russia. Make it harder for people, because no one wakes up in the morning out of a sense of civic duty to do disinformation operations, right? People want to get paid for it. So if you can make it harder for them to get paid to run these things, that's great. If it's on TV or whatever, then yeah, you've got the regulatory mechanisms that are available. But to be frank, most of this stuff is social media, and I just advocated for using your intelligence apparatus, finding who what they call the trolls are. So there's bot farms, which are computer programs, and then there's the trolls that run those things. Find the trolls and sanction them, and then to the extent that it's possible, if CSE can use some of its offensive cyber capabilities under Bill C-59, hammer them, try and take them offline. And the NSA did it before the last election, right? So you watch what happened to Russian disinformation. They made it technically more difficult. So there are tools that are available for this. So I would encourage a hard look at those.
Ms. Stancher, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I wish to move the following motion. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082, given that Canadians continue to be affected by geopolitical impacts of the October 7th, 2023 attacks by Hamas on Israel, and given that recent court filings have revealed disturbing details about a thwarted ISIS-linked bomb plot targeting Jewish Canadians on Parliament Hill, and given that an anti-Semitic riot occurred in Montreal on November 22nd, 2024, The committee immediately prioritized a study to run concurrently with the study on border security agreed to on Thursday, November 21st, 2024, to investigate the dramatic rise in terrorist plots and acts of violence targeting Canada's Jewish community, including the thwarted terror attack on Parliament Hill. That the study be comprised of no less than 8 meetings, and that the committee invite one, the Minister of Public Safety and the Minister of Immigration on the matter of the motion passed on Thursday, September 19th, 2024. A special advisor on the Jewish community, relations and anti-Semitism to the Prime Minister, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Commissioner, Brigitte Gauvin, the RCMP Deputy Commissioner for National Security, representatives of the RCMP's Federal Policing Integrated National Security Enforcement Team, Robert Burley, Executive Director of the Canada Centre for Community Engagement and Prevention of Violence, Director of CSIS and other law enforcement officials, Director of Parliamentary Protective Services, recognized experts in national security, and representatives from TikTok, X, Snapchat, Discord, Reddit, Facebook, Telegram, Minecraft, and Roblox, civil society and academic organizations, including the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs and B'nai B'rith, to discuss the foiled terrorist plot, the rise of violent anti-Semitism, and recent measures the federal government has undertaken to address it, and the role that social media and gaming platforms play in radicalizing youth and mobilizing violence, and that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House.
I just think that where there's a will, there's a way. And let's just exercise some will to make this happen.
Ms. O'Connell?
Since we're out of resources, I move to adjourn.
There's a motion to adjourn.
A point of order, Mr. Chair.
My motion.
There's a point of order from Mr. Chahal.
Yes, I believe that's a dilatory motion that Ms. O'Connell brought forward, so we have to proceed to a vote.
So we have to proceed to a vote.
Ms. O'Connell,
Yes.
Ms. Damoff,
Yes.
Mr. Callaway,
Yes.
Mr. Schall,
Yes.
Mr. Sarai,
We.
Ms. Denshaw,
No.
Mr. Lloyd,
No.
Mr. Shipley,
No.
Mr. Motz,
No.
Madame Michaud,
En faveur.
Mr. McGregor.
No.
So 6 yeas in favor, 5 nays.
Yeah. So the motion passes. Meeting adjourned.